Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for getting up nice and early and joining, and everybody on the live stream. Hopefully we can bring you some good insight. So I'm Nate Hamilton. I lead ecosystem for Moonbeam, and so we're here to talk about DeFi in the Polkadot ecosystem, as well as just DeFi in general, I think. And so we've got a great panel here today. So I'm going to go ahead and let everybody kind of introduce themselves, their project, talk a little bit about what they're up to, and we'll start with Sergey.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Great to be here. Sergey, I'm co-founder of Axler. We're working on secure cross-chain communication.
I'm Trevor Marshall, CTO of Current. We're local here to New York, so I'm excited to be on this pretty legendary stage with everyone here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Colton Conley. I'm founder of Prime Protocol. We do multi-chain lending and borrowing.
Hi, everyone. Thamim here from StellaSwap, one of the co-founders. Really excited to be here. Looking forward to this discussion.
Nice. Awesome. So let's start out with, how did you come to Polkadot? So why don't we start with TA down at the end?
In a past life for my sins, I was an engineer. And going through that sort of process, you learn a lot about sort of architecture, design, and whatnot. So something that really attracted me to Polkadot in the early days was this sort of like service-orientated architecture. And as soon as I saw those sort of the parachain mechanism and the design come out, I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. It's a business-driven sort of logic. And yeah, so decided to sort of jump in to the Polkadot ecosystem.
Gotcha. Well, how about you, Colton?
Well, for us, because we want to be a multi-chain DeFi protocol, Polkadot was the most natural place to build a home because of the shared security, interoperability between different parachains. Making sure that our home base wasn't Polkadot allows us to benefit from having a financial primitive that can scale across many different blockchains and deliver a unified borrowing experience to everybody.
Gotcha. Now I know, Trevor. I know you're a big DOT supporter. You guys aren't, obviously. You'll get into Current a little bit more about what you guys are up to. But you told me in the past you're just a huge DOT supporter. How did you come to become a DOT supporter, if you will?
Yeah, so Current is a fintech. We offer checking accounts to over 4 million members here in the US. But actually, in the early days of Current, we had a lot of crypto products that we were working through prototypes. The whole concept being, what is the future of banking? What is the future of payments? And can you build technology that can connect to both sort of the traditional finance world and the future of where balances will be stored and how money will work? I came across DOT just because since the beginning we've been very close to the crypto ecosystem, and the emergence of a really collaborative community by almost code, it's encoded to be a highly collaborative space, I think is the future for a lot of really exciting financial technology development. So yeah, we're pretty excited to be part of the community as well.
Nice. And Sergey, obviously, you guys have been launched for what, like 4 months now, 5 months now, but DOT was kind of one of your first connections. What kind of went into that choice of kind of where you wanted to deploy first, and DOT being in that mix?
Yeah. So I mean, for us, the goal is to connect as many ecosystems as possible, right? And certainly, when we do sort of our evaluation, we try to look at the ecosystems that are exciting, that have activity that we expect to continue to grow, that we see kind of the long-term future for, right? And I think Polkadot and Moonbeam were kind of rolling out a lot of excitement activity, a lot of interesting use cases that we're starting to see to come up over and over. Yeah, we just wanted to connect it, be able to provide liquidity and connectivity with other ecosystems like Ethereum, Cosmos, and so on and so forth. So. To us, it's a super exciting ecosystem, lots of interesting stuff going on. I think the technology is incredibly interesting as well, so it just made sense.
Cool. Awesome. So obviously the panel was dubbed a DeFi panel, so we might as well start off with what is the state of DeFi right now. Obviously there's been a lot of changes over the past 3, 6, 9 months, and so love to get everybody's kind of take on where DeFi sits today and maybe some of the things that get you guys excited. Let's start with Colton.
Well, I think long-term, I'm still very bullish on DeFi. I think a lot of the things that you've seen happening to centralized financial institutions, especially centralized crypto financial institutions, it's not going to happen with DeFi because everything's transparent, everything is over-collateralized, and so if you're participating in a DeFi protocol, you can be much more certain about what's the actual amount of leverage that I've taken out, is this position safe, And you can see very clearly whether or not that's the case, and you don't have the opacity of these centralized institutions. I think on the other hand, we are recovering from a period of largesse that was created by the bull market, where a lot of people started creating these DeFi protocols that were really centered around the assumption that their governance token or protocol token was always going to be valuable. So you had people giving out insane incentives to basically mask issues with product market fit. And because people were just willing to ape into these governance tokens for different protocols, you had a lot of protocols that weren't really delivering new value, that were just copy and pasting. And I think a lot of people really got burned once the bull run was over and people decided, okay, this product actually isn't really going to generate cash flow, so I'm going to sell it now. So I think DeFi needs to recover from that, but ultimately this period of correction will be healthy because you'll see new projects that emerge stronger out of this. And I think the way large existing financial primitives have operated through the bear market is overall very bullish for the long term.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned everything's over-collateralized. Do you ever see a world where under-collateralized loans could be utilized in DeFi in some way, shape, or form?
Sure, but I think that you probably, in order to do under-collateralized properly, have to marry it with some sort of centralized guarantee. Like the reason why you have over-collateralization in DeFi is because there's not really any legal recourse to go and recover your loan from somebody. Whereas if you're interacting with a known counterparty who's KYC'd, then you have recourse to go after maybe some of their other assets. So I think it's really difficult in DeFi unless you actually know who your counterparty is and you can come to some sort of agreement to have legal recourse to be able to offer that under-collateralized experience. I know there are some really cool projects working on these sorts of on-chain credit scores, but you really run into an agency problem if somebody can take out an under-collateralized loan and just walk away.
Yeah. Thamim, I want to throw it over to you. I can see your face. You want to jump in.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the first sort of DeFi summer that we saw had a lot of this sort of primitives around sort of lending, borrowing, trading, and yield sort of farming and whatnot sort of come to fruition. What's not really happened is how that's sort of like scaling to the options, derivatives, all that sort of good stuff, where traditional finance kind of sits. Only until very recently, some of the layer 2 solutions are coming to live, and I think we're going to see a lot of that be sort of an interesting play, and sort of infrastructure companies like Axela and whatnot playing a really important part of that. So some of the stuff that we're seeing at StellaSwap is actually how do we, so back to your point of like how do we add value to our governance token and whatnot, is trying to identify who are our users, what is their credit scoring, how much on a day-to-day basis, how much are they holding, how much sort of income is coming into their wallet, and then just getting a really deep understanding of what their overall wallet credit scoring sort of looks like. It's going to be quite interesting. So we're looking at sort of partnering with identity or decentralized wallet infrastructure to get a better insight on our sort of users and then give them better products and services tailored towards them. And I think as we begin to scale, we're already having pretty interesting discussions with traditional institutions as well as crypto institutions, and that's something they want to see. So we've just recently integrated with the Moonwell guys, and that's the borrow lend sort of platform on top of Moonbeam, fantastic team. And that's, if we want to offer like a tiered lending to our users, they need to have a better understanding of actually what is the credit score of your users. So we're quite interested by that. That's number one. And I think number two, what we're looking at is actually protocol-wide insurance coverage. It's becoming so super important. There's so many security vulnerabilities, and DeFi gets mega complex when you're integrating lots of different technology stacks and different sort of yields. You get a lot more sort of vulnerabilities across the protocol. So I think we're going to see insurance becoming ever so more important as part of the stack offering.
Gotcha. Sergey, I mean, you obviously are connected to a bunch of different ecosystems, so you're seeing a lot of new teams talking about DeFi, going cross-chain, multi-chain. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I think what the last cycle has shown us is really, as a whole, like DeFi sort of found a product market fit. Maybe some individual projects didn't have that, but I think overall, like there is a demand for the technology, right? And I think especially now, like over the last month, we've seen with a lot of, more like centralized finance in the space, like being, kind of blow it up in some sense, right? And we're seeing all the negative results of that. And so I think in the longer term, we're going to see more and more, demand for kind of transparency, verifiability, accountability from these applications, which is something, we have to work towards. So super excited for that. I think what we're seeing more and more, which I'm, super excited about, and including like Prime and what they're doing, is like this next generation of DeFi applications being built that has much better, user experiences at the very core, at the functionality layer baked into them, right? So in the last cycle, every time you use an application sort of on one chain and you want to use another application on a different chain, it's sort of a lot of hopping, a lot of like bridging in the middle, wallet switching, and so on and so forth. So I think what we have seen is that the user experience is still not there to an average user to be able to adopt these technologies and actually use them. And so I think this next generation of applications, like the guys on this panel are working on, is effectively going to get us there, where you can interact with different DeFi primitives, with different DeFi applications directly from your wallet, with any assets that you like, with one-click transactions, and have a much smoother experience. So I think the bear market is actually an opportunity for all of us to build that out, based on the robust core infrastructure, and make sure that regular people can participate, tie it with identity, maybe some privacy, and kind of continue scaling.
How about you, Trevor? What do you think about DeFi right now?
Yeah, I think kind of to Colton's point, the DeFi actually creates tremendous opportunity, especially for institutions, because of the transparency and openness, and creates the ability to actually layer in the identity required for sort of proper governance and regulatory oversight. So stuff like what Akala is doing with Coinbase now and Figment, like that is the very beginning of a much wider institutional adoption, which eventually gets to customers. That's something that we're at Current really focused on. We'll be making assets available within Current pretty soon, and that's really the first step of getting towards these more advanced applications in a really easy and deliverable way. I think that's really where the centralized institution still has value, which is in distribution, being able to aggregate and distribute product, but doing that in a way that the product itself has all of the benefits of openness and transparency, which is the only way that a lot of this stuff will work going forward.
Gotcha.
If I can add something to that, I think what I'm really, having sort of dwelt on some of these points, I think what I'm really sort of excited by is DeFi is going to move into becoming an infrastructure service. So conversations we're having right now with some other protocols is actually how can we utilize your staking infrastructure? So in this sort of, when the whole fintech revolution, something as a service was picking up, I think this year we're going to see DeFi as a service picking up. How do the whole sort of NFT hype and that sort of died down now? How do we collateralize NFTs for loans and whatnot? I think that's going to be like super exciting this year, or DeFi season 2, sort of DeFi as an infrastructure service is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so Sergey kind of touched on it a little bit with Prime. I want to give Colton a second to talk about how the next generation, I think, of some of these DeFi primitives are being built. I want to let you kind of explain a little bit about what Sergey touched on, of how you guys are kind of forming what we're building at Prime.
Sure. So what we're building at Prime, we're basing it on Moonbeam, on Polkadot. And this gives us the ability to use Axelar as our primary message passer to connect to a ton of other blockchains outside of the Polkadot ecosystem. But by having our home base on Polkadot, we'll also be able to use XCM to go to all of these other parachains and basically offer an experience where you're able to deposit into our protocol from anywhere, and then you can take out a loan from anywhere, and it's backed by your entire portfolio, cross-margined across all of these different blockchains. And we think that this interoperability aspect is going to really provide a huge boost both to user experience and capital efficiency and financial utility. And I think when you're evaluating how interoperability is going to change DeFi, you really need to pay attention to those two things. And that's ultimately going to, I think, determine which financial primitives are most suitable to basically go multi-chain like this. Are you improving the user experience, eliminating the amount of wallet switching, hops they're having to go through, And are you providing them more financial utility? In our case, we're allowing you to actually borrow against a diversified collateral base. We're allowing you to keep on positions that are, providing you with positive carry in some ecosystems where maybe you're staking tokens, you have some LP tokens, but you want to borrow against that somewhere else. You don't have to sell and then bridge. And I think swapping is another natural extension of this, because if you don't have to do as many hops, you're saving 30 bips each trade plus slippage. So I think that that's also a primitive that is going to go cross-chain and interoperable. And there are a lot of applications to this kind of horizontal composability layer that we're building that'll make the financial infrastructure uniform and more useful to people as we move DeFi forward.
Great. Great. And Thamim, you guys are already working with a bunch of XC assets and things along those lines. How has it been so far being able to work with all the other parachains that are connecting in?
Yeah, we've been in a fairly privileged sort of position as being the sort of leading DEX or DeFi protocol on top of Moonbeam, which is, and so the first sort of XC assets we launched was XC.Dot. That sort of completely blew up within within 24 hours. Now we're going to be shortly sort of launching with an Akala sort of meta pool, and I think we're beginning to see a lot of interest growing from the broader Polkadot ecosystem. So the realization from us has been actually, I think the ecosystem is slowly realizing the power of the parachains, which is, we really don't need 100 DEXs to sit on every single parachain. There's too much fragmentation in liquidity, user experience. Maybe there can be one DEX across the whole ecosystem, or a couple of DEXs. So we're kind of thinking about how can we actually begin to list or partner with other projects on other parachains, and what is the sensible utility we're going to get out of that. So the conversations, like coming back to this DeFi as a service sort of piece, is how do we start to approach Web 2.0 companies? If it's a payments company or a remittance company or an e-commerce shop, what can they do to benefit our DeFi services? And then how do we transport XC or Polkadot projects using the XCM protocol? Those are the sort of thought pieces we're having right now. We'd love to sort of have those conversations with anybody in the crowd that's building. I know Centrifuge just came live with Moonbeam, and yeah, so that's going to be a pretty hinging growth point for us on our DEX.
Great. So Trevor, you kind of touched on it a bit, but I wanted to go back to it in terms of, with everything going on with Celsius, BlockFi, Nexo, some of the more CeFi focused companies in doing a bunch in DeFi, and what's happening there. How can that actually go back to being pretty symbiotic, and where did that kind of go wrong? What do you think about that?
Well, I think the value there is it's extremely easy to kind of onboard through these different apps and services. And I think that's ultimately where the value of sort of a centralized partner in this space lies, which is if you can aggregate across customers and provide the UX and sort of all the onboarding, the compliance, the things that require centralized scale to do properly, and then you connect it into something that is open and transparent. I think that's really the magic. That's what we're looking to do. That's what I think a lot of other people are starting to look, especially given the outcomes of some of the people in the space. But I think that's really what it comes down to, is making sure that you think properly through where the responsibility of your institution lies and where the responsibility of others can take over and sort of accelerate. And I think that's one of the things that I've found most exciting about the Polkadot ecosystem, is that everyone has this collaborative mindset of understanding I can become extremely specialized and extremely proficient at this piece. And I'm going to make sure that other people know how to use this piece so that we can create this big machine basically together. And I think that's being involved in crypto tangentially for many years, this is the first time I've really seen that level of collaboration. And I think that is ultimately these open conversations and open projects that's the path forward to make situations like that not happen.
Yeah. What do you think, Sergey?
And I guess just one thing to touch on that, right? Like I think you made a point that it's much easier to have like distribution, right, and user experiences and so on and so forth. I mean, I do think that's why kind of the next generation of like DeFi is going to be much easier to use, because I think like the infrastructure was not really there, right? And like you said, like the experience is not comparable, right? Like using a DeFi project, from the first generation versus a centralized, very, very different. That's primarily because I think, kind of it's too early. Still, infrastructure, has to be built along the way. I do think we're going to get there where experience is just as smooth, right, as with some of these centralized projects, but definitely will take, a little bit of time. I think the last point on that is that I actually think like it's interesting where, like when the internet was developed, like all the foundational sort of infrastructure was laid out first, and then applications came like 10, 15 years later. I think in blockchain space, it's almost like the opposite, where we have like, billions of dollars that are moving around. Like we have users that are suffering to move those things, right, through one wallet to another. Infrastructure is so far behind that there's actually a pull, right, to actually build the infrastructure in parallel that will secure this like billions of dollars that's being transferred while, there are real users that are using technology the next day you ship it. So it's quite interesting, I think, to see this, relationship between kind of the infrastructure and the demand for this stuff at the same time rising. So I don't know, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the core things that the team at Moonbeam focuses on is making sure that the infrastructure for builders is there. And so we've gone to pretty great lengths to make sure that any infrastructure pieces that are needed for builders are there. And it is kind of funny, if it's not, they figure out how to deploy it, but it's one of those things where when you don't know how something works, you start to be like, oh, there might be some risk there. And so making sure that the tools are hardened and that there's some standards around it and that people are using the same, frameworks is I think vital to it. So, Colton, I know you have a more CeFi background. I'd love to hear your thoughts on CeFi coming into the space, mitigating risk. How does it actually work long term?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is going to be more CeFi participation in crypto. You can already see that with big funds getting into crypto, including where I was previously at. I do think part of the thing that CeFi is going to introduce, and we've already seen, is you have to find a balance between transparency and taking proper risk precautions versus how much profit you're going to make. And I think a lot of CeFi institutions are used to levering up quite a bit, and I think they're going to need to be a little bit more conservative with that as they move into crypto, because as we've seen recently, it's very easy to blow up, even if you are one of the largest hedge funds in the space, and even very smart people are prone to taking excessive amounts of risk, because there's a lot of rewards that you can make. If you're taking a lot of leverage in a very volatile asset, it can go either way. So I do think we're going to see more and more CeFi participation. I also think we're going to see more CeFi participation in DeFi. And I think long term, the more that we can get CeFi to be using these DeFi protocols, the better, because that's going to contain a lot of this contagion that we've seen happen with these centralized lending books that are lending under collateralized, clearly with too much risk. And I think a lot of the downturn that we've seen has been so aggressive because people took on too much risk. A lot of this is fueled by those relationships between centralized parties that trusted each other when maybe they shouldn't have. And so if you can get them more into a trustless ecosystem where more transparent and proper risk precautions are being taken, I think that's really how you bridge CeFi with crypto in a responsible way.
Yeah. Don't trust, verify. TA, I wanted to loop you in here. I know you guys are focusing on institutions and thinking about some things that are going to bring institutions. I'd love to hear how.
I mean, one thing I love about DeFi and what's something I'm seeing is the level of openness and access. It doesn't matter if you're a $20 investor or a $20 million sort of whale. You can offer the same level of service and access. So I think we're kind of torn a little bit. Where are we drawing those lines of staying pure to the DeFi kind of ethos and the values it carries with it, such that do we want to give preferential terms to large institutions? Just because you've got a bigger checkbook, does that give you the right to come in and ape in some of our farms? So we're really trying to sort of, I guess, the more important piece here is how do we provide large institutions drive on information and access to information. So I think that the more important piece here is part of this infrastructure building is how can we have better analytics such that the large institutions can actually make the markets a lot more efficient. So I'd say it's more still we're at that level of providing data clarity, integration into existing price feeds and whatnot. We're still at that sort of very primitive age before we can sort of engage with institutions in a more complex way.
Gotcha. Sergey, I wanted to come back to you. Colton mentioned kind of what Prime's building with this general message passing thing. I want to make sure that we at least touch on what that is. I think bridging has been a hot topic for a year for good and bad reasons, and I think what you guys are building is pretty unique. And so wanted to give you a second to kind of talk on what general message passing is and how it's going to help power cross-chain DeFi and things along those lines.
Yeah, so I think traditionally, kind of as we mentioned, when people wanted to go from one chain to another, they had to move their assets, right? And it's a very explicit process where you use wallet 1, you use maybe some bridging software in the middle, you use a wallet 2, probably have to make 30 clicks along the way, find out the gas and so on and so forth. It's a horrible user experience, not gonna scale, right? And so what I'm super excited about is this next generation of what we offer, and through Axel and working with Prime and a bunch of other folks, is the ability to not just move assets but move information, right? And when you move in information, you're almost changing now to an environment that you can bring code to where the assets are, and you can move assets when you need to, but you can also move what I call as Turing complete code across different blockchains, right? So in the same way as, in Bitcoin, you can only send payments, and then Ethereum came, and you could actually write programs to do interesting things with, assets and DeFi. In the same way, general message passing allows you to have kind of complete computation that you relay from one state to another to synchronize it. And so, for instance, this new paradigm of programming that Prime is sort of exploring is an ability to build almost on the best chain for your needs, right? So they're building on Moonbeam in this case, and have connectivity to everyone else, and still be composable and still be unified to enable this next generation of user experiences, right? And so kind of leveraging general message passing allows you to do that, where you have your master sort of home base, where most of the logic lives. It's sort of optimized for your needs, but you still have satellite sort of contracts and connectivity that can communicate through general message passing or token transfer, whatever that is, with your home base for the application, and provide this better experience and unified liquidity.
I think it's super exciting, because ultimately what that gets towards is a completely transparent experience, where as a user, I don't need to understand what's happening under the hood. And that's something we think about a lot, which is where I think a lot of our opportunity is, which is you shouldn't have to know all of the pieces that are happening under the hood. You should be able to interact from a single place from a user's perspective. Most users of any internet technology are not thinking through things like Turing complete code and all of those sort of programming and engineering principles, but they're getting the value. And so work like you're doing is how we accelerate towards that, which is really exciting.
How does Current think about, does multi-chain play into your thoughts at all? If you're getting into any DeFi yield, the risk that might be associated with it?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so our customers will never think about multi-chain. Yeah. We never want to put sort of the burden of that education, the burden of that technical understanding. Our goal is to get the best possible value. So multi-chain to us really just means now we have the ability to very easily capture open and transparent value on-chain. And I think that's where the opportunity is how do you deliver all of the sort of value that exists? Multi-chain gives you access to more and broader value. And how do you deliver that in a way that's consumable to someone who isn't going to be thinking about how to store their private keys, for example?
Gotcha. So with the last couple minutes, I want to make sure I give everybody the ability to talk about what they're building, what they're excited about, some of the new features come into their their protocol. Why don't I start with TA at the end?
Yeah, so we're sort of as mentioned, we're in a very privileged position at the moment with the largest sort of DEX on Moonbeam. We're probably doing about almost $5 million worth of trading volume a day at the moment. So we're in this really sweet spot of we can run very small experiments. So there's a lot of stuff we're doing on the user experience front-end side of things, which is a lot of the pools that we launch, they instantly become super successful. how can we begin to sort of optimize the rewards that we give to our users? Does that mean things like, are we putting caps on the pools, or the caps on the number of users that can actually access those pools? And then we're sort of launching with sort of a couple of base pools or meta pools with Akala, Dot. We're going to be launching a liquid staking solution for Glimmer. And I think more excitingly, I think we're going to be the first. We're building a hybrid router for efficiently managing your stable and your standard AMM messaging features. So there's some of the stuff we're working on. Other than that, we're going to be plugging in some insurance services, like a group-wide insurance service for our users. And we're looking forward to actually opening up to the broader Polkadot ecosystem such that we can bring more assets onto Moonbeam.
Cool. Colton?
Well, for us, we're going to be very soon sharing testnet with the public, which we're very excited about. And I think in addition to this whole borrow against your whole portfolio offering that we're having, something else that we're taking very seriously, which I think we'll be able to set a new standard for, is how you're mitigating risk at a protocol level, and making sure that a lot of these protocols that are just wrapping one or two assets, I think, are exposed to a lot more risk than a protocol that can diversify its collateral base a bit more. So even in a sell-off where everything is going down, you have more pools that you can liquidate into. And I think for people who are really concerned about mitigating their risk, whether it be through like the stable coin that they're holding and knowing what's backing that stable coin, knowing that it's not only transparent, but being actively managed in a way that's intelligent, I think is something that we're going to be able to offer people that everybody will be really excited about, especially in the current environment.
Awesome. Trevor?
Yeah, we're just really excited about figuring out how to deliver all this amazing value to millions of people across the country. We'll be launching crypto trading pretty soon, and that's just the seamless ability to take your paycheck, move it across into different crypto assets. But that's really the first step in a much longer roadmap of how do we bring this true open value and make our members owners of the new financial system and kind of right that wrong that has existed forever in finance.
Gotcha. Sergey?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a combination of three things. A, just continue to scale to support more ecosystems and providing more connectivity. B, I think we have a very strong emphasis on security and continue to improve that across a variety of dimensions. If you've seen like interoperability of the last year, first gen interoperability protocols have all been hacked by now, right? Like it's a super scary stuff. So we have the strongest base than like a proof of stake security that we're continuing to optimize with a lot of security upgrades. And then three, what I'm super excited about is continue to work with protocol builders to help them build these next levels of experiences that are smooth for the users. Right? They don't have to think about multi-chain environments. They don't have to think about wallet switching and so on and so forth. And that comes down to building various also like service layers on top of the network. So an ability to pay gas like on multiple chains with one-click transactions and so on and so forth. So yeah, working a lot with protocol builders, allowing them to build those experiences and kind of helping them facilitate with the services on the back end.
Cool. Well, we got a little over a minute. Last question, and again, none of this is financial advice, but when does the bear market end? Start with Sergey.
So I think it will end when we're going to provide new, interesting experiences for the users. When is that going to happen? I think it's a function of many factors. I think as we have seen historically, every time we came out of the bear market is because something new, exciting, resonated with other audiences or existing audiences that people have not experienced before. And so that's what I think will end.
I totally agree. I mean, there are exogenous factors, the Fed, things like that, but ultimately, when value exists, it'll come through.
Gotcha.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think a lot of what popped the bull market was Fed-driven, but in order to get us back out, we're going to actually have to deliver stuff of value because people are being much more critical about what they're investing in. So, as long as we keep building through this, eventually, macro conditions will change, and what will pull us out is people being excited about all of the new products that they're going to have access to, and how much more efficient things are than the previous generation of DeFi and crypto at large.
Yeah, difficult question. But the one metric that I personally like to follow is just how many new developers are coming in, what's being built, and that's a main difference from the last bear market. And I think it's going to be a lot shorter than people anticipate.
Nice. All right. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Thanks, guys, for joining. Really enjoyed the panel today, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of Decoded.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.